What is up? Remembering John Ruhlin group. Mike Dowd here. I have no intention besides sharing some stories, some lessons, some artifacts, and hopefully inspiring you to be more like this guy here, John. It's been now almost 3 months since we lost John. The world lost John. His wife lost John. His kids lost John. But John is still here with us, right? And I'm going to do my best, just kind of talk to myself and talk to you and whoever gets the chance to listen to this. I know many people have posted podcasts and made, just remembrance posts about John. But I haven't really shared a lot of my relationship with John. Maybe you got a chance to listen to my eulogy and know a little bit about our story, but I just want to kind of just talk to you. And I don't know how long this talk will be, but I'm just going to ask God to bless it and inspire it and bring some laughs, tears, smiles. So, what better to listen to me on Saturday at 8:43. So yeah, my name is Mike Dowd, and self-proclaimed John Ruhlin's best friend. And he's definitely my best friend. Miss him so much. Still doesn't feel real. So as you guys maybe know, we both sold Cutco, and I was always the rep who wanted to be better than John and beat John and be the next John. And I did that through, one, not being liked by John, and then obviously becoming really close with John. So I'm going to try my best to not be all over the place, but I guarantee I'll be all over the place. In this group, if you're on this group, it was started kind of right after John's passing. And I think we're maybe at a couple hundred people now. And it's just to keep his legacy alive, right? We're trying to keep giftology at the forefront of this world of just being generous, radical generosity, thoughtfulness, right? Just being more like Jesus, being more of a disciple, being a better father, being a better husband, right? Being a better business owner. So if you're on this group watching this, add some friends, add some people that might be inspired, share some stuff. I don't want this to be about just me posting all the time. So this is me. And maybe you watched my eulogy, but this is me when I first started Cutco, Slick Rick. And I guess I didn't smile as much back then. And that's who many people got to meet when I first sold Cutco. And I guess maybe the harsh, slick, greasy hair is what got me to where I am today because of the grit and the grind. And whether you call it sleaziness or coolness, John met this guy right here on a company trip. So my first year was 2005, and I sold $100,000 worth of Cutco. And I heard of John. I was trying to just think before I started the live video, what was my first remembrance of John? And I don't remember how I first heard of John. But when you see sales reports and updates, you see John's name and you hear about this guy selling a lot of Cutco. But until you meet that person, it's kind of like William Wallace, right? If you ever seen Braveheart, you hear this guy and you hear this guy and you hear this guy, and then you meet him. And if you've seen Braveheart, you're obviously inspired by a story like that, right? Of pursuit of freedom and pursuit of country. And John kind of had that aura around him, right? Where he was so big and so famous and doing so many things that no one ever did. It almost became like, is this guy real, right? And he was real. He was real as they can come, right? He's one of the most real people you'll ever meet. And maybe you never got to meet him, but you've seen and heard stories and watched podcasts, maybe read his book. But I don't remember exactly how I first heard of his name, but I went on a trip that I won when I was 20 years old to Cabo. And this is how I showed up. I don't think I had the full suit on. And the first night of the trip, you guys maybe in my eulogy heard about the champagne party. So that was the champagne. I back in the day there was Kodaks, right? And pictures. So I had to go through some boxes here. But we had a party. There's a lot of great CSPs, and back then we called them FSMs that were there. And John apparently didn't like me. He thought I was sleazy or full of myself or just maybe annoying. And he wasn't direct to me and said, hey, you're a jackass or you're a dumbass. He just didn't like me. And you know what? That's pretty fair, right? Because in life, if you don't like somebody, you don't need to be their best friend. And then to kind of fast forward a year, I don't know if just God, orchestrated all this and planned it out. But a year later, we were roommates on a cruise. And by the way, I always looked up to John, even though he maybe didn't like me at first. So my first Cutco business card, you can see I did throw a smile in there. I was a business gift consultant because that's what John was, So I had to put the business gift consultant on there. And you can see my old phone number and my old email was Trowid85 was my nickname, Trowid. And I had Cutco's website on there. So I wasn't super smart about marketing, but that was it. And then on the back, it says, the greatest compliment you can give me is to refer me to your family and friends and business partners. So that was my first business card inspired by John Ruhlin. And I had it cut. See that? I had it cut because I wanted to be really fancy. So a year later, this is what, 2005, 2006. So we were roommates on a cruise. And actually before that, I found some other pictures here. We were on a trip at Lake Powell. And this is us when I was, I guess I cut my hair there. And the thing to do is wear shirts cut all the way down your side. I guess that was the thing to do. And John didn't get the whole Lululemon yoga pants we're in back then. You can see it was the big old baggy Hanes sweatpants and a John Deere hat. But this was one of the most epic trips that many CSPs that are still around and Vector reps would tell you. It was Lake Powell, Utah. And I think this was before when I became roommates with John, because I think this is where I became more liked by John. So we went on a hike, and me and John, this is just a picture of John, found ourselves on these mountains. And I remember there's a few others with us, but it turned out to be basically me and him kind of just out there seeking God's creation. And this trip had so many memories. We were in two houseboats on Lake Powell, and so many great Cutco people. There was a story of Josh Moeller and we took out a boat and did figure eights, and he blew the engine, and we were stuck out there. And just so many great just Vector Cutco people still remember that trip. So to fast forward, I found a few pictures of the next year. So I guess I sharpened my look up. There's Sugar Shane Nagel, another legend. I always thought John looked like Tom Brady. And you can see he evolved from sweatpants to a popped long sleeve collar in Cabo, his North Carolina hat, the cool aviator shades, and the cargo pants. And there I am drinking a Modelo or Corona. And when Rachel says I'm not in shape, see that, honey? I did have somewhat of a six-pack back then, and I was really cool. And I guess that's where Lincoln gets his peace sign from, Rach. That was me. So that's when I befriended Johnny. I don't know if it was John's request or Cutco was like, let's take the most salesy person and the most generous person and put them in a room together on a cruise ship for a week. And I found my old journal. And if you watched and saw my eulogy, I talked about some of these little stories I'll share with you. And this is my journal from 2008. And back then I would just write out dreams and, just list out dreams and just basically write it on paper, because a dream is basically a goal that you write down, right? And I just remember reading my dreams to John, and he was just there nodding his head, smiling. I guess retire by 40. I have about 4 months to do that. That one will be buy the most expensive car and make it a convertible with Lamborghini doors. By the way, I was 20 years old at the time, so learn how to salsa dance. I didn't learn how to do that, Rach, but I know how to make a good salsa. Make bed in a love bed of roses. I did highlight that in 2010, Rach. We accomplished that one. win $10,000 from a casino in a night. I've never done that. Win the lotto. I guess back then I was more thinking about materialistic things. Drive the Batmobile, eat a foreign food in a native country. I did accomplish that. So I remember just reading all these to John, and I guess probably some of them maybe caught him off guard with some of my over-the-top humor. Oh, here, have a spa and sauna in my house. And, John helped me get that because I bought his old sauna. So I remember myself reading all those to him, and I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to be friends with this dude. And after that trip, I just started emailing him all the time. And I went back through my emails here, and these are only from 2010. And I'm just seeing just his such generous replies, and it's always encouraging. Awesome job, Mikey. Way to go, Mikey. Way to lead, Mikey. You're so great at your job. And this is somebody who, if you really think about it, I'm just this up and coming rep. And John at the time is selling, 200, 300K, selling corporate gifts, where everybody in Cutco is just grinding out home appointments. And he, I don't know if he did this to everybody or just chose us to do this with me, but just really, just invited me in his inner circle. So I don't have a ton of memories of just after that cruise, and until he finds and meets Lindsay and moves to basically St. Louis, because that's where Lindsay's family's from, Southern Illinois. A lot of her family's from St. Louis, and just going through some emails here, just seeing him planning special dinners for Lindsay, and just so thoughtful with just inviting family and friends and people just to be together. And I think for the first lesson is love people where they are, right? He loved me where I was, but see the best in people and believe in people and reply to people and encourage people. Because at the time I had nothing to give John, and he probably had nothing really to give me, but he always encouraged and he always loved, and he always, and I think when I made the comment, he didn't like me, I just think I probably rubbed him the wrong way, because I don't think John disliked many people. So he wasn't over the top I'm going to take on this slick Rick, sales rep named Cutco Mike, and just, if you just joined me, that's a picture of me when I first started Cutco. So a lot of just emails back and forth of just, sharing, and I mean, he's sharing things with me about, hey, I just quoted, J.R. Horton, 12,000 gift sets. It's 2009, 2010 when no one was doing this corporate selling big. I closed my Vector office because I was a Vector manager. And I did an email here. Hey, I went field training with Tom Rastrelli, who, recently passed away a couple years ago. And he just said, way to be class act and give credit where credit's due, because in Vector, in Cutco, a lot of it is about what am I doing? What am I selling? I'm doing this, and my sales are this, and my average order is this, and I sold this. And what John was always great at is just kind of giving the credit and dishing the credit and allowing people to kind of just enjoy their achievements. And it was, and I think I was just thinking he is the GOAT, right? The greatest of all time. He passed away at over $15 million in Cutco sales, and I think he was just getting started. And no one will do what he, did, and the effect he had on the world of just generosity and people and connections. But to be the GOAT is somebody who doesn't self-proclaim to be the GOAT, right? And that's why John is the GOAT of Cutco sales and networking and connecting, because he never, ever wanted credit. He never asked for credit. He never even, I would even joke with him at times, when we'd be driving to, Costco for New Year's and be like, hey, you beat these people by 300K. He's like, oh, really? I didn't even know that. Or one year, I think somebody was close to beating him, and he's like, oh, really? And then I think the next day, he's like, yeah, I just closed a 50K order. I think I sealed the deal. But it was never about I'm winning and I'm the best and I'm the greatest. It was always about, giving the praise and connecting people. So basically it's 2009, 2010, 2008. Just going through some emails here as we're talking. And like I said, there's no formalness to this. I just want to bring some love to this group and encourage you to share a story or two. And, what sucks about people, when they pass away, they're gone, right? And it's our job to kind of carry on that legacy. And it's our job to carry on the stories. And, a lot of people have lost somebody of a loved one this year, not just, Lindsay and the girls, but people are reminding me like grieving is good, right? Crying is good. It shows how much you love somebody. Sharing their story and lessons is the greatest gift, because that's what's going to keep his story and his name, or that person's name and story, alive, right? So, most deaths, it's like wake, funeral, it's over, send flowers. But, what if I was the one to pass away, right? And the roles were reversed, I know for a fact John would be doing things to keep, my laughter and story and my family and my name, at the forefront, right? Or at least behind the scenes, encouraging it to be, talked about, which he was also so great at. So to kind of fast forward here, I just remember getting this email that basically says, hey, be my neighbor. And, I joked about him sending that to everybody, and he assured me that I was the only one he sent it to. So at the time, I didn't have really any money to my name, or any, status to my name, except selling a lot of knives and blowing the money on silly stuff and stuff that didn't have value. And I said, really? And I brought it up to Rachel, and Rachel at the time was like, she's like, why would you want to buy a house? Like, is it going to be a frat house? Because we weren't married yet or anything like that. So she was a little bit like, whoa, wait, we're in love, and we're, close by each other in an apartment. And I'm like, no, like, you don't understand. Like, this is John Ruhlin. Like, he's asking me, and, you're dating me, like us to be his neighbor. Like, this is a big deal. And that's where I think, everything just really fully blossomed into such an amazing friendship. So basically, I filed for a loan, or applied for a loan, got rejected. Applied for a loan, got rejected. Got a loan, rejected, like probably 12 of them. And John basically emailed the bank and was like, hey, you got to give this guy a loan. And I think part of it was like he wanted me to be his neighbor because he didn't want somebody else to share a driveway with them that he didn't know. And he saw my hunger and my passion and my grit and my drive. And after a few emails back and forth and a few stories and me listing out my sales report and my shows for like the next 3 years, the bank gave me a chance and gave me a loan. And that was a huge, huge moment in my life, being, 2012. So, being 20, 23, 24 years old, getting, a home, so then I remember when John first moved in, it was a couple months before that, he had an air mattress, and literally we just hung out on an air mattress and watched, he always loved Ohio State football, Cleveland basketball, and anything like basketball, big game related. And I remember just watching, just basketball on his phone, like on this air mattress in his house, and just being bros. And I think for you guys watching, like what John loved about me and what I loved about him is like, we never really talked about like how much money you're making, how much you're selling, who you're selling to. It was just buddies, just being there for each other and just being normal people. Right. And that's why, for me, it's going to be hard to just find a best friend of like 20 years, because you don't just grow those overnight, right? You grow those through time. You have a lot of friends and a lot of acquaintances, a lot of peers, and a lot of people that like, trust, and see. But just to have somebody, like a John Ruhlin in your life, they will never be, another John Ruhlin. So I remember a couple of my first gifts I got from John when I moved into my house was an alligator back scratcher and an alligator fly swatter. I mean, if you know anything about John, and to rewind, so I'm going to rewind, fast forward. There was a point in my career where I had stickers on the side of my car that said, call Cutco, 1-800-CUTCO Mike or whatever. And John would always give me crap. He's like, would you ever see like, Elon Musk or Bill Gates or, I forget who he mentioned, but he's like with the bumper sticker on the side of their car, and he'd always give me crap. And I'm like, well, John, you're like the Costco and I'm like the Walmart. Like I'm the deal guy and you're the high end guy. And now, I'm a little bit of both, but, he's like, hey, I'm going to give you a $500 fly swatter so you'll never forget me. And this thing has been great for flies and, once in a while cracking a kid's behind or two. But, even then, had it engraved, as you can see there, and the date. Actually, this one might have been for our wedding anniversary. So always thinking of stuff that just, very few people ever thought of. Like, give somebody an alligator fly swatter, right? Or an alligator back scratcher, right? So, John always was thinking about, just like, how could I be best in class and be unlike anybody else, right? And it was always fun and neat to just see and witness, right? So, as we're kind of, being neighbors and sharing a driveway, there's just so many different just stories, and I probably should have wrote them all down, but, I remember him always just calling, hey, Mikey, you got a minute? Or, hey, Rachel, you got a minute? Their first dog and our first couple dogs we got together, and, Nala would always free reign, because our neighborhood didn't have any houses at the time, and she would just eat up our packages. And John would always like find a way to like send us a gift or a meal or something just to like, say, hey, I'm sorry for Nala chewing up stuff. But, I always remember this line, like, this shall pass, right? And I share this with a lot of people, like as they're going through parenting or marriage or life. And it's just like, this shall pass, right? This stage of life shall pass, right? And everything, if you look back on it, it seems like it wasn't that hard, right? Or wasn't that big of a deal, right? Another thing that John taught me was always like, is that a hill you want to die on, right? Because I would come to him and be like, hey, I'm pissed off at this, or they take this away from me, or corporate's, bugging me because I'm sharing screenshotted images. And he's like, dude, is this a hill you want to die on? And I always remember, like, it reminded me of like, is this a fight you want to get into? And this could be for anything, right? It could be for marriage. It could be for parenting. It could be for sales. It could be for bureaucracy of corporate jobs. But it's like, is that really what you want to go down fighting for? And a lot of people always go like, why are you always so positive, Mike? Or why are you always so calm? Or why don't you ever get angry? Because I'm always like, I'm not going to die for this silly $20 cause, right? And sometimes I give my wife a hard time because I'm like, Rach, like literally it's $20. Or Rach, like it's not worth it. Like, just move on, right? And sometimes she gets at me because I'm like, no, it's like, let's just leave it. And even if we're right or wrong, like, I don't care. Like, I don't want to die on this hill. So Johnny always taught me that. So many just, birthday parties and events where we just get together. And, I brought out one of his favorite drinks. As you guys know, Johnny lost a lot of weight, right? And I think as an entrepreneur, you just go, do, right? You live out of a car, you live out of a meeting room, you live out of a hotel. And one of the times John invited me because he would sell to all the suite owners for sports teams. And he'd be, hey, I just sold to the Orlando Magic, Jacksonville Jaguars, Chicago Cubs. And it would always be fun because, like, he would always share these cool things he's making. We took the wood from, the old bleachers at Wrigley Field and made a speaker out of it. Always just stuff that would be like, wow. And he would always include me in those conversations. And it always felt, cool and special. And maybe, he probably just trusted that, I wouldn't do anything with it or share it to the masses and just, respect his privacy of just his thoughtfulness and his things that he would create behind the scenes. So it was always cool to kind of be around that of just like, man, like this guy is just like thinking so far outside the box. Now I lost the train of thought here. Oh, so he invites me to the suite owners convention for all the sports teams, all the college sports. And I don't know how he got into that market, but he found a way into that market. I think knew NASCAR. He knew somebody in NASCAR. They invited him to, meet the suite owners for this sports team. And then lo and behold, John selling Cutco knives and knives and stuff to people that are wowing like CEOs and executives that buy like the suites for sports teams. And I still remember this story. And for people that came to this little celebration I hosted before John's service, we had about 60 friends and family get together and just drink top of the line bourbon. And I got my hands on a Pappy 15 that I was saving. And I'm like, you know what? John had me drink Pappy 15 with him. So we busted that out and just had just a great time. And now I lost my train of thought again. Oh, so I had M&Ms there because many of us know John as a super healthy, sauna, cold plunge, very raw, holistic, healthy guy. And that's great. And that's what he inspired me to get better at, right? I'm not nowhere near John's status of like living life to like the extreme, like don't put any bad stuff in your body, which there would be times where I'm like spraying my yard with Roundup to kill the weeds. And John would be running out and be like, no, Mikey, like if you step on that and bring it in the house, like there's lawsuits and cancer. And then like, I'm like, all right, Johnny, so that was just our relationship. There'd be times where I'm in the sauna with him. I'm like, Johnny, just like go eat a freaking McDonald's. Like, and he's like, no, Mikey. And like, he would have his Oura ring on and some breathing thing. And he's like, I'm breathing at level, 100 out of 100, like for clean air. And I'm like, oh man, I just took down 2 Cokes from QT today. But, at one point, I was rooming with John, and it was like 2 a.m. We were in Minnesota at this convention. I just hear this, like, it's a bunch of this, stuff like shatter, moving around like in the room like a raccoon. And I flipped the lights on, and John's got this bag of M&Ms open, and he's just slamming peanut M&Ms. And ever since that happened, I'm like, Johnny. Where's the Johnny that would slam the peanut M&Ms at 2 a.m, when he would be so health conscious at times. But there's so much value to living a healthier life, right? As we're seeing with RFK and a lot of his values and beliefs, which I know John really enjoyed him and a lot of his outside the box thinking of what's healthy and what's not healthy. So, so there was times where we would go out to dinner, my wife and Lindsay and John would be on a 3-day water fast. And I'm like, John, just have a steak, or John, just like a little bit. And he would have his own like water jug or reverse osmosis, or we'd be celebrating a birthday party and have a full spread of stuff. And he was so disciplined when it came to committing to something or putting his name on something or his word. Or what would happen, I think, behind the scenes is he would go on a business trip, and sometimes he would have to eat the steak and eat the hors d'oeuvres and have the bourbon. And then when he'd get home on Sunday, he would go on a 3-day water fast because he knew that he needed to reset his body. But that, he would always, he would never have a Coke, never have any soda, nothing bad. Always have, a sparkling water would be his treat. Some other cool stuff, I grab, he, and by the way, if you're like, man, I just want to do something more, I want to be more generous, I just want to know more about John, read his book, Giftology, ask questions, reach out to me, reach out to people that, are talking and advocates of John, Cameron Harrell, Justin Donald, Hal Elrod, there's a list of another 24, but, John Hall, John Israel, Mike Monroe. There's, like I said, I can't list everybody, but he always told me this story of Colonel Littleton. And that's who makes these fly swatters. And, I'm sure you can still buy those through Giftology. But, always just like, he would be like, most places give you these $5 Padfolios. And this is like a $300 like leather thing. So he found this guy named Colonel Littleton. Let me see if I can find a photo of this dude. And this is years ago. And John was always on the prowl for like the next awesome product. And it had to be American made. It had to be quality. It had to be customizable. It had to be, something that you can't just go to a store and buy. And that's what was so great about John is like nothing he did was the norm or half-ass or last minute. It was always something that was super thoughtful. And it was something that was always, personalized or had a cool story. And that was, I think, like the cool thing about just being, so close to John. Here's this guy, Colonel Littleton here. So if you're just joining me here, I'm just trying to pay some homage to Johnny. So this dude, I forget how Johnny met him, but this guy, I think John just Googled best leather goods made in America. So John's like, I'm just gonna show up at this dude's business, and it's in Podunk, Tennessee, somewhere 2 hours south of Jack Daniels. And John shows up and basically wins this guy's heart over. And he's like, yeah, we don't have any businesses that resell our stuff, but somehow John found a way to resell the stuff and make some money off of it. But yeah, always thinking if I'm gonna do something leather quality, it needs to be unique, right? So alligator fly swatter, right? Super nice leather, I guess you can call it a penny tray or a key tray. I still have this, from 10, 15 years ago, a nice lit, and the patina's nice and breaks in nice. So, and that, I wish I could just wrote down every story, but I told Rachel, I'm just going to go with it and just start talking. But, I just remember he would always be like, yeah, I met this person or they found me. And by the way, the stories of people that would send him gifts that he wasn't wowed by is a whole nother book of they sent me all this stuff with red dye, and obviously if you know Johnny, that's not his style. And Mikey, do you want it? So a lot of gifts he would regift to me because everybody wanted to have him sell it or represented it. But he only picked, I would say 5 things, right? Cutco being number 1, right? Because he believed that every home, the story he always told me is if you put it in mom's kitchen, it never leaves mom's kitchen, right? So that's what somebody told him when he was a brand new rep selling in Amish country is hey, if you put a knife in mom's drawer, she doesn't just open the drawer and throw out the knife every year. It's in that drawer for 50 years. And that's where he got the idea of engraving paring knives. And then he sold, 50 paring knives to an attorney that I think was his girlfriend's dad at the time. And then he got another deal with Central Boiler, and then Amish Furniture Company. And then, then it kind of just grew from there. Then he's well, I can go after sports teams. I can go after Beck's, seed company. I can go after casinos MGM. I mean, there's times where John would be yeah, I just quoted a deal for $1 million to MGM. They were going to use Cutco and leather goods for their VIPs. And that's one thing I wish John could have accomplished is selling $1 million order, because he would tell me so many times how many quotes he would have out there that were just holy. And I'm over here selling 3 paring knives and buy 2, get 1 free. And he would always give me a hard time. I'm John, Walmart is just as successful as Costco. It's just they sell quantities and Costco is selling quality in bulk, right? So, and now I have, a mixture of both just because John has influenced me quite a bit. So, so I forget the story about Colonel Littleton that I was going to tell you, but, anything he's done with them has been fun and awesome. But, and then, the mug story, right? You guys have seen me post about the mugs. And John was met or gifted a mug by Bradley Dalton, who basically helped John kind of create this beautiful artifact that they've rebranded to called Artifact Mugs. And I think they might even rebrand it to Legacy Mugs, or they bought the domain name. But Artifact Mugs is basically taking a normal thing, right? So just like a knife. You take a knife that's a normal knife, but if you put a crappy knife in a drawer, it doesn't get used. But if you put the best knife in a drawer, it gets used. If you buy somebody a $5 plastic fly swatter, it probably gets thrown away. But if you buy somebody a $500 alligator fly swatter, it's probably going to be used for a long time. And there's been times, our dog who passed away, Blade, he would run away. And I would just go outside and smack that thing, and he would find his way back home. So then, I forget what year John met Brad, but Brad, nice Christian dude, finds out about John or reads John's book, and he sends him this mug completely customized. And it's not, you can buy a $5 mug and have a dime a dozen of those, or you can make a mug that tells a story about somebody. And John, Rachel told me, was so excited to give me this one a few years back. And it basically, has my story of like, let me see here. Here, will you be my neighbor? And then, we got bourbon on there. Me throwing a football, with the kids. I got steak, and because I always ate steak, grilling. I'm trying to look at this sideways here. Patient, and this, like, these are adjectives about me. Me and Rachel, we got married and I proposed in New York City. So you got this storybook here of memories, right? And then me, I would always ride with the kids on the tractor, in a Christian cross there. And then Jesus is astonished by just my grace and blessings, received, generous, loyal, and these things come with a video and a story of basically somebody close to you. They get all these things about you and they make it into a mug. And it is one of the most precious and beautiful things. And I just ordered 3 of them right after John passed away for people that are super close to the family that we're going to bless with here in the next couple months to a year. And those those are I think John was selling these for $2,000, and people would buy it because. How do you make somebody cry? You give them something that they can never buy, or they can never get, or is meaningful, or is unique, or different, or useful, right? And it doesn't have to be a $2,000 gift, right? This could be sold for $5, right? But the story and the artisan that goes into it, and the time, and the precision. It's just like this. Like, you can drink water for free, right, out of a tap. You can then drink water for $1, right? If you go to Sam's Club, or 50 cents, right? You can buy the waters for 50 cents out of the vending machine. Or you can go to a sports game or Disney and buy a water for $6 or $10, right? So, like, it's the same thing, but it's the environment it's in, or it's the experience that's around it, right? It's the same thing with this mug here. So what John would do is he'd find people like Tim Tebow or Dave Ramsey, or I'm drawing a blank here, and then he would find somebody super close to them, and he would say, hey, let's team up, or let me gift you this, and let's give this to him on stage at the end of a keynote speech. And then John would come up with this mug, or he would be behind the scenes and give it to the person to give to them. And then they would play the video, and literally people would cry and weep because it's like their life story or their relationship with that person. So if you've been seeing me talk about this, and you're thinking like, what do I give my wife, or what do I give my husband, or what do I give my pastor, or what do I give my boss, or what do I give my top rep? And you want to make them feel like no one will ever make them feel this special, do a mug. Because this thing is amazing. So I think they're 3 to 6 months out, but reach out to Cammie with Giftology, or send me a message and I'll connect you with them. But this thing here, and I think they have a forever guarantee on them, John said, is if they fall and crack, they'll make you a new one. So pretty cool. So where am I at here? Like I said, just trying to pay some stories and homage to Johnny, and just what he would do, and kind of the things that, I would be able to experience with them, and just normal things. Like, we would go to Costco, and John would buy the crab legs and the scallops and the lobster, and he would butter baptize them. And then I would make the steaks, and then we would always saber a bottle of champagne with the veggie knife on New Year's, and he would always get, the gummy bears for the kids, and the pomegranate seeds, and we'd have the tradition of New Year's. Halloween, he would always show up in a big costume of some sort, of Pikachu or Olaf, or dress up as the guy from Moana. And I know his girls will never forget those moments and memories. And it's just like, think bigger, right? I remember him inviting me to meet this guy who passed away named Eddie O, who was the first sommelier ever in America. And he wrote a book called Power Entertaining. And he always talked about this story of, like, when Eddie O had like his 40th birthday. You always think about your birthday, like, you want people to spoil you. And Eddie basically told all of his friends, like 12 of his best friends, get in a tuxedo. I'm going to pick you up at this time. And he basically, like, went over the top for his 40th. And Rachel's probably watching this like, all right, Mike, you're not going to do this for your friends. But I'm always thinking like this, like, how do I wow somebody when they're expecting the complete opposite? So the story of Eddie O, like he picks up these guys in a tuxedo and the couples and the wives, and then he takes them like to the hood in this limo, and he has like these brown paper bags and it's like cheese whiz and just crackers, and he's like throwing them for a complete curveball. And then he goes to like this private airport, and they jump on a private plane and fly to like the Bellagio restaurant right in front of the Bellagio. And then he's like, the next 24 hours are on me. And in this book talks about like leading with the best. And I still remember this because always at parties that John and Lindsay would have, like they would always have a great appetizer or a great dish, like right when you get there. And we would always try to do the same, right? Like when people come to us, it's like lead with the best. Have the best bourbon, have the best drink, have the best appetizer. And John and this Eddie O would always say, like, don't have like the peanuts out there and don't have the little chips out there so people fill up on that. Like have the hors d'oeuvres, have the caviar, have the tuna, have the steak, have the fillets, have the bourbon, the good bourbon. Like bring it out first, because then people are wowed. And it's not about money and flash. It's not about who has the most. It's about how to give somebody an experience that they'll never have, right? And people will talk about that experience. And that's, another lesson I learned from John. It's like when I take somebody out, or I take my mentees out, or I take Rachel out on a date, like I make an itinerary and I play it out in my head. I'm like, let's make this special, because that might be the last time you get to see that person. That might be the last time you might ever get a chance to do business with that person, right? So always thinking like that. It's like lead with the best, serve the best, and there'd be times like we'd go to John and Lindsay's and he'd have champagne like right when you walk in the door, because he's like, let's get this party going, and it's not like we get drunk off of champagne, but it's like, most of the time you save the champagne for the end of the night when you're already like half tired, half asleep, full as a freaking, the girl from Willy Wonka, you're busting out your belt. But I always remember that, with John, it's always like deliver the best first, because you don't want to save it. What are you saving it for? Yeah. So yeah, there's so many stories of even just making a snowball with John. You think of making a snowman, and most people make a snowman with the 3 little snowballs. But, we made this ball that was probably as big as a pickup truck. And we just kept on rolling it. And there's a picture of that somewhere posted. It's like, it's like how to make memories bigger and better. They're all coming back to me. Like, John showed up, like there's an Eckert's farm by us here in St. Louis. And most of the time you get the little small, like, pumpkins, like the pumpkin pie pumpkins. And maybe you get 5 of them if you're splurging, right? And maybe you get 1 big pumpkin. But John would always show up with the biggest pumpkin on the property. Like the one where you go, how the hell are you going to get this in my car type of, like, let's bring out the forklift. There was a time where John bought one of those reindeers that you see like in front of like the Chase Park Plaza or the Ritz-Carlton. I'm like, where the heck did you get that from? He's like, oh, I traded a bunch of knives for it. And it's, one of those 20 feet reindeers, before now, like Home Depot's making all that stuff. Just like I said, it's just going and delivering and just always bringing, a story of fun. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything like that, but yeah, Johnny, you'll be missed, dude. You are such an amazing human being that just loved so much, gave so much. And it's crazy just how many people just know of John or were connected through John or were blessed by John. Oh, some other cool things. You guys have seen that story on the video posted about John of just, he would send people a briefcase, of $1 bills that would equal, $1,000 or $2,000. He can easily send somebody just a gift card, right? Or just send them, hey, here's a generic thank you note. But it would always be over the top, like a briefcase. Or like, think of like those Louis Vuitton boxes that, are multiple hundreds or thousands of dollars. Like he would ship ultimate knife sets to, I forget the coach of Clemson. Lou Hall? I forget. Dabo Sweeney, I think. And he sends these ultimate sets, fully engraved, every knife engraved with a story or a quote or the kids' names, grandkids' names. And it was like 40 knives, all customized. And, you add up the cost of that, and then you'd have it in this big box, and then it would open up, and there'd be a video screen of John or the person who gave it to that person and say, hey, we just love doing business with you. And he would call that like the atomic bomb or the atomic love bomb. And just, just so many stories of just him always like, and it's awesome as John would reshare those stories. Or like Gary V, he picked up at the St. Louis airport. Gary V, you probably know who he is. And he, took him to his little warehouse in his shop and showed him all these different, gift ideas. But yeah, I mean, overall, guys, here's the thing. When somebody passes away, it's our job to keep the legacy alive. Whether you send, a gift that's different than flowers, or a gift that's different than a basket of, edible arrangements, like an artifact. One thing John inspired me to do is like, I would send, just, normal thank you notes. But now it's like you send a metal business card, and when you write a message on it, right? And it's like a $5 stationery or a $10 stationery, and it's not just, 50 thank you cards for $5 from the dollar store. And then when people would pass away or retire from the military or retire, I'd send them a K-bar fully customized with their years of service, or if somebody passed away, they're in memory of and their dates that they lived. And literally people would call me and say, man, that touched me. That was something I didn't expect. And it's not like like people always ask me like, well, how much did you sell? Like, no, like you're not doing it to sell something. You're doing it to make somebody remember and have that moment. It's like you ingrain those moments into people's mind of just thinking outside the box. I know there's going to be a lot of cool stories that come out with his next book. A lot of people are coming together, sharing stories, but I just felt called to just come on here and just kind of open up and share how much that guy loved me and how much I love that guy. I'll actually take it here to our little, so John, before he moved, he sold me his sauna. So you may be seeing this in some of his videos. And it's kind of it's a bittersweet sauna, because I know how many moments John was in here just sweating and dreaming and thinking and praying and doing business deals. And every time, John would just message me at 10:45 at night, hey, Mike, you want to get together in the sauna? We would just be in there and just talk, dude. And just like, dude, I love you. Marriage is hard. Kids are hard. Life is hard. But we'd always find a way just to pray together and celebrate and love and build each other up. I remember when Rachel and I, were going through a little bit of a breakup before we got married. And John would say, why, Mikey? Or, why aren't you doing this like the way the world wants you to think? And it would be like, well, I love the story of redemption. I love the story of forgiveness. I love the story of God's grace. And that's the bond we share together. It's like, there's so many times where John would be like, yeah, this rep, they sold $50,000 to this guy I sent a sample to. And I'm like, man, like, did you ask for the order? And he's like, I just said, hey, I'd be happy to split a deal. And he would never like talk bad about that rep or talk shit about that rep or complain. It would always be like, you know what? There's bigger fish out there. There's bigger whales out there. I remember the story he told me of like showing up. I think it's when he first met the D.R. Horton guy. This is him living in Ohio at the time. And he said he sent them samples and emails and texts. And by the way, most business owners, they only reach out when they need something. It's so funny, right? When you're checking in with them and trying to win their business, and then like they ghost you, 10 times, and then finally they need something or they get connected to you somehow, some way. I guess it's just the way of doing business. But John was like, you know what? I'm just going to show up at this guy's office. So he got on a flight that morning, and I don't know if he wrote about this in a book, but this is a story he told me. And he like took a flight out to Houston or Dallas, and he showed up at the corporate office. I think he was like 25 or 26 at the time, and the lady's like, hey, do you have an appointment? I forget the name of the CEO. And he's like, no, but I flew out here, on a flight this morning. And I've been trying to email and text him and call him, and he hasn't got to reply back to me, but this is very urgent, and I just want to give him something. And John, he told me, he's like, he was, shitting a brick and sweating, but he was still confident, right? And the guy was like, all right, you got 5 minutes. You better make it good. And John, he's like, I don't know what I said, but I just said, hey, you didn't get to where you're at running the biggest home builder company in the United States by sitting on your ass. And I'm not going to be the biggest and greatest gift knife salesman in the history of Cutco by sitting on my ass or something like that. And the guy was like, I like you. Let's do business. And I still remember that story because that story has been in my mind. Like when I've been a rep and I like keep calling this person and I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to send him a gift. I think of just here, the Chop House here in town. And Megan, I'm excited to do business with you. We've always ate at the 1818 Chop House and we loved it. And they've always given world-class service and just, over the top, like customer experience. But I'm like, imagine if they gave out knives to their VIPs or their staff and their chefs, because this is what Cutco does, is we are the best, you're the best. And I sent her a knife and, after a bunch of emails and texts back and forth, I just sent her another knife and I'm like, let's just do business together. And we did an awesome deal here a couple weeks ago, and she's excited, and we're going to use it as a way to kind of connect more people in the community, and VIPs and business owners and politicians. And it's just like the gift of a knife, whether you think it's wild or crazy. I love when people look at me when I say, hey, you should give them a knife for Christmas, and they're like, what are you talking about? Like, that is a dumb idea. And I'm like, yes, it is. But it isn't, because no one else is doing it. It's going to involve the wife, the husband, the kids. It's going to be in their drawer for 50 years. It's going to be branded or engraved. It's going to be unique. It's going to be high quality. It's going to be gift wrapped. It's going to be special. And I will tell you this, and John taught me how to barter. I mean, John was the king of bartering. I mean, I think he would barter dental, and he bartered for a car. I mean, so many things, and I don't know them all that comes to mind, but I've used Cutco as a tool to get indoors and barter. And I tell people, and John did this all the time, it's like, use Cutco as a prospecting gift where you send it out to prospect for a meeting or a phone call or a relationship. And he got to the point of doing it through just meeting people. So he'd meet somebody and then he would befriend them, right? Because, there's always a catch, right? But the catch it'll become exposed eventually, right? Like if there was a catch, it would be exposed and then people would get word of it, right? But with John, there wasn't a catch. It was just like he wanted to be generous, he wanted to be loving, he wanted to be giving, and he wanted people to do business at the highest level of generosity. So he'd meet somebody, befriend them, have jokes, have laughs, be likable. And then he would say, hey, let me give you a gift set to give somebody. And then I think later in this career, the last couple of years, he would send out full ultimate sets or full Cutco knife sets. And he would call it like high stakes gambling. And he would say, hey, let's send this to this person and just attach it with a beautiful note and a beautiful message. And let's just take it from there. I even think John actually had a deal with like Tom Brady. And I think he was even going after Joe Rogan. I don't want to kill the beans if this story makes it to his new book, but I always would tell John, like, you got to tell the stories that don't go well, because people like the story as a failure. And I teach this with my reps and mentors. I'm like, when you mess up, this is your chance to like double down and like go over the top again, or come around the back door and do double the amount of generosity. But John's goal was always to be on Rogan. And I know we have a small group here, but if you're watching this on YouTube and Rogan, or there's a way to get John's name on Rogan, I know that was one of his bucket list things that he was trying so hard to do. And there was a really cool story, and I don't want to spill the beans, but where he basically showed up at Rogan's house, and it didn't go as planned. And I always love that story, hearing it from John, because everybody knows Rogan and everybody knows John, and John was in disguise, and basically it didn't go the way he wanted it to. But I kept on telling John before he passed, I'm like, dude, you have to write a book of all your deals gone bad and all your stories of screw ups and mess ups, because I think people like that more because, after a certain point, you kind of just get numb to success, right? When you see my post all the time, you're like, all right, Mike, I know you're selling a lot of Cutco. I get it now. So when you make it fun and unique in stories and you tie in lessons, it gets people to act or remember, right? So, maybe I'll do a part 2 here. I don't want to make this 6 hours long, but I miss you, John. I love you, John. It still doesn't feel real. But your legacy is going to keep carrying on, at least through my, platform, even though it's not as big as many. I wish all the people that you've given gifts to and been on their podcast would just keep talking you up. I know there's a handful of them that are doing a lot behind the scenes and doing a lot financially and doing a lot on their platform. But that's just life, It's crazy, but we all have a date and we don't know when that date will be. For John, it was 44, tragically. But no one knows what tomorrow is, right? So if you want to go on the trip, go on the trip. You want to drink the Happy 15, drink the Happy 15. You want to send somebody a $3,000 knife set, send somebody a $3,000 knife set. Sometimes I would joke with John, you want to take your kids to McDonald's and have a Happy Meal? Have a Happy Meal with your kids. Because none of us know what tomorrow holds, right? So live it up. And I'm not telling you to go crazy and spend all your money like, Richie Rich, but, act on those moments. Another cool gift here, and I'll kind of wrap up here. So I'm a Cutco guy, and John was a Cutco guy, but John never really sold the Cutco pans, and I don't know if that was because he didn't get the hang of them or he just fell in love with this brand here. But this is called Smithy Ironworks, and you can see it's got our family name on it here. And these are, I think, $300, $400, $500 cast iron pans, which is crazy, right? Because you can go to Walmart and buy a Lodge pan for $20. But the packaging and the story and the craftsmanship and the accessories and the engraving and just the pure style of something is meaningful. Because here's the thing, the money comes and goes. Money's a bad way to keep score. So when somebody's like, I only want to spend $50 on this person, I only want to spend $100 on this person. John and I would talk about this in the sauna all the time. He's like, that person is looking at the relationship ass backwards. Because what happens if they lost that relationship and that account or that custom home build or whatever, right? Or that employee, like the latter years here, when, everybody's like hiring, they're like, hey, we need good workers. So we'll pay you $75,000. And they never met them, didn't vet them. And they're like, we just need workers, right? Post COVID, because, everybody needed to work and everybody's hiring. He's like, companies will just hire somebody for $80,000, but then they'll give all their best employees, all their best customers, a koozie made in China. And then they wonder why their culture sucks, right? So what John did is he would say, let's appreciate the inner circle. Let's appreciate the wife, the husband, the receptionist, the janitor. Let's appreciate, the IT guy that never gets any exposure on stage. Let's, appreciate the people that are always forgotten about. But if you lost them and they left you, or they said, I'm resigning, you would do everything you can to keep them, right? Or another story John would say is like, hey, if you're going to Vegas or you're going to Chicago or you're going to New York or you're going to whatever town you live in and you're going to have a steak dinner. And, companies do this all the time. Like, let's have a steak dinner, holiday party, right? And John I just love listening to John because he would always just be raw and real with people. He's like, yeah, if you're going to have a dinner and you invite 12 people, and whatever, you have it budgeted for $2,000 or $3,000, and they say, hey, my friend's in town, or I got my business partner and he wants to bring his wife, is that okay? And no one in their right mind is going to say no, right? Yeah, bring them with, right? And that's the point John would make is like, you would just blow money on entertaining and food and events and parties. But when it came to artifacts, right, like a Smithy pan or a mug or a alligator fly swatter or a $200 leather pad folio by Colonel Littleton or a Cutco knife set, they would look at us or him or you and like, why? That doesn't make sense. It does make sense, right? So to wrap up here, I know a lot of people are asking how the family is. Here's what I say. Reach out to Lindsay. Send them a gift. Send them a message. They're humans. they have to move on with life, and life without their loving husband and their loving father. And grieving and death is weird. It's hard. It doesn't make sense. But to me, if the roles were switched and I passed away tragically, I know for a fact John would be talking about me, continuing to have parties, continuing to share my goofiness and thoughtfulness and creativeness. And that's all I'm trying to do for John. And I can't say I'm going to do that for everybody that passes away because I don't have that deep friendship with them. But maybe you will have somebody pass away or had somebody recently pass away. Could you just do a little bit more? Could you carry on their legacy a little bit more? Could you give a little bit more this year? I've had so many people that's kind of just all God, right? It's all God that are reaching out. They're like, hey, I'm going to buy gifts this year, or I'm going to do this year, or I'm going to change my way of thinking this year because of John, or because of giftology, or because of, the sermon I heard at John's service. I'm going to go to church more. I'm going to show up because you know what? Life is short. Life is precious. So, Lindsay and the girls are doing as best as they can be. They are moving forward as hard-working, independent, super women, Wonder Women. If you saw the picture for Halloween, it was so awesome. It's such a blessing. So sad, but so beautiful. Like I said, his day of passing of his celebration of life was the most beautiful and one of the hardest days of life, right? Because no one wants to say goodbye to somebody that's their best friend or their husband or their son or their business partner, right? Think about that. But it was beautiful because of the story of Jesus, the story of giving, the story of just somebody who lived a life that gave, and very rarely asked. If he asked, it was for a way to kind of bridge a relationship. Another thing I forgot to talk about was so for Rachel and I's 5-year anniversary, I said, John, do you have any connections to Broadway? And, lo and behold, John knows the editor-in-chief of New York Times Magazine because he sent him knives and he got invited to a party at one point. So he emails them and he's like, all right, Mikey, I got you, front row seats to Hamilton. And this is when Hamilton was the best show of the time. Things that he would do that he didn't have to do. And I know many of you saw this, but the greatest gift, which will be one of the hardest gifts to live, is a life without John. But John, before he passed away, they bought 40 acres. John, through a lot of back and forth with lot and zoning and planning, sold us 10 acres. So it's going to be sad to not have John around, and it's going to be sad to live a life without my best friend, and it's going to be sad to keep selling Cutco knowing that the greatest Cutco rep of all time is not going to be around to be celebrated with and be honored. But we're going to do everything we can to love his wife and his kids and keep his business going. So if you listen to half of this, 5 minutes of this, all of it, I just want to say thank you. And John thanks you. And if you ever read that picture I had made as God didn't take John, he gifted us John. So, if you really think about it, we all are going to die, right? We're all going to pass away. And we're all going to have a date with destiny. So it's our souls that matter. And it's the things and the lessons and the gifts that we leave behind, right? Whether it's a story, if it's a tangible thing, but it's our life that we do on earth that gets remembered, and it's our soul that will continue on into eternal life, right? So I truly believe that God had nothing to do with taking John. We live in a broken world. We live in a world full of sin. We live in a world that is ran by the devil, right? He controls this world. God ultimately has full reign and full power, right? But, we lost John because God is going to get the glory. He's going to bring people to the cross. He's going to bring people to radical generosity. He's going to bring people to true forgiveness. He's going to bring people to just know the story of Jesus. And John really lived that out here on his short life of 44 years. So thank you guys. I love you guys. And hopefully you got a laugh or two, or you got a moment where you're like, wow, that's pretty cool. And I'm sure I have a list of things that I forgot about. Oh, when John pulled up, he bought a truck because he had to be different, and it was ran off of CO2 gas or something like that. And I remember it showed up at 7 a.m. one day, and I blared Bruce Springsteen, born in the USA. When he like pulled up, the guy on the truck with the flatbed brought it here. And our pastor Larry has a funny story of John not finding a gas station that had the CO2 gas in it to fill up. So they called me at 1 a.m. coming back from a trip from Indiana because they needed a tow. But guys, thank you so much. And if you can do anything this holiday season, give a little bit more, forgive a little bit more, laugh a little bit more, hug a little bit more, smile a little bit more, cook a little bit more, read giftology, share some stories. The more people talking, the more people sharing. Maybe somebody passed away in your life that's close to you. Maybe you're inspired. Host a little event for them. Make a little memorial image in their name. Don't just accept death and just kind of do the norm. Don't just do the wake and do the funeral and then, do the flowers and then move on, right? Because to me, like, if I passed away, I sure hope my wife and kids or my best friend or somebody would like try to do a little bit more than the typical things. And it's hard, like this past week, I've had 6 or 7 customers, lose a significant other, and most of them are later in life. And it's just like, man, death is just real and it's inevitable. And it makes you just realize like, find a savior, and that savior is Jesus. And if you don't believe in that, that's okay. But that's what I believe in, and that's what John believed in. And that's what, I would love to pray for you with. So if you ever want to pray, message me. But read John's book, and in his book, you'll see there's a lot of Bible verses. There's a lot of ties to biblical truth. So take care. God bless, and have a happy holiday season. Merry Christmas, and miss you, Johnny. Take care.